It's been a very, very dreary, rainy day here in West Bend, Wisconsin, but we needed it. I mean, we probably got about 2 inches of rain already. Hey everybody, Yogi here. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well. When I filmed this episode, I forgot to do an intro or an outro. So I'm going to do an intro. Probably not an outro, but I'm going to do an intro anyway. Last Friday, I caught up with some former co-workers of mine, and we all took a ghost walk here in West Bend, and it's run by a friend of mine who's been on the channel before, Janie at the Couch, and he's thinking about doing the tours again this year. He's had a couple years off where he wasn't doing them. It's starting to get towards Halloween. I'm starting to see people put Halloween themed stuff up on YouTube. So I thought, you know what? Ask Nate if I can film this tour a little bit. Not the whole thing, just bits and pieces of it, parts of it, a couple stops maybe, and show it to you. And hopefully that'll generate some interest for people to come out and check out his West Bend Ghost Walks. You can go to janieatthecouch.com, and I don't think he has anything set yet, but he's leaning more towards doing them again this year than not. Again, it's just, he was doing the first tour in a couple years, so, you know, the nerves might have been there a little bit. And it was a big crowd, too. There was probably like 26 of us, something like that. So, without further ado, here is the West Bend Ghost Walk that was recorded on, I don't know, August 11th, 2023. Check it out, folks. Enjoy.
It was the far windows on the middle section here, the second floor of the building, over on this side that I'm pointing. We noticed that the lights would turn on, be on for a certain amount of time, and then turn off. And I was still an active volunteer here at the time, and I know that at that point in time there was no timers on these lights. And we noticed it the entire time that we were waiting on the tour to come and form up. And it was a kind of a bad weather night that night. Only a couple of girls showed up for the tour, so it was a very small tour. And we noticed the entire time I was talking and be on for X amount of time, off for X amount of time. And we decided as a group that based on the way it was turning on and off, that if we got back here at 9 o'clock on the dot, they should turn on. So we made it our mission to go to downtown and back, and sure enough we got up here right around 9 o'clock and the lights turned on just like that. No reason that should happen. There's no timer, it's motion sensor, but sure enough they would turn on and off. So that has never been explained. The county has had people come out here and examine those lights over the years, and nobody's ever found an excuse for why that might be happening. Motion sensors can act kind of crazy, but these act crazier than any I've ever seen. So it's a fun thing to do if you're in West Bend at night. You don't have a lot to do because there's not a lot to do in West Bend. So I've lived here for 2 years. You can drive around the courthouse and see if you see these lights turn on. Doesn't cost anything. And you might also see a ghost. If any of you did bring cameras, one particular group of people caught a very interesting photo. I don't have the photo, they didn't give me a copy. But that middle window up there at the top of the tower, which is supposed to be where an urban legend says someone hanged themselves, unverified urban legend. Nobody has died on this property again as far as I know. But somebody was taking pictures of this while I was talking, and they got what sure looked like a figure of a person standing up there in that window. So yeah, that's something else you can do. You're roaming around West Bend, snap a quick picture, and maybe you'll see something. Can't guarantee it. I've had experiences here, and most of them here involve the staircase, which goes up and down this big tower area here where the lightning struck. People have heard disembodied footsteps with no one to make them going up and down the stairs. If you step on those stairs, they creak and bump, and it echoes and reverberates throughout the building. It's a very distinct sound. People have also seen a spirit in the shape of a white mist. This was also near Halloween. I told you guys about the Halloween haunted house they used to do over there. When you bought your ticket for that, you would wait over here for your time to go through. They had some family activities set up in the courtroom, and kids could watch videos and color until it was their time. The parents got the kids. They were coming down the stairs from the courtroom when Mom emailed me this story years after the fact. She said that she saw a tendril of white mist or smoke snake its way along the underside of the stairs and sort of curl around this big chandelier, which I don't think you can quite see through the window. It's a big, beautiful chandelier. And she looked at her husband to see if the husband saw it. He nodded yes. The kids were oblivious to it because they wanted to go to a haunted house. And Mom said that they took the kids up in their arms. They were very small, and they ran out of the building and did not go over to the haunted house to have me dressed like a clown jump out at them. So they got their money's worth from that. There was a former director who used to work here. On her first week on the job was here on a day when she was the only staff member here. The museums were closed to the public, and she saw a black, shadowy, vaguely human-shaped form come out of the research center on the 3rd floor and kind of float its way down the steps. And I believe this was her first week on the job. I don't think she even knew it was supposed to be haunted. So that's how she felt it. So these are some of the things you can experience here. Both of these buildings are open to the public. As far as I know, I think you have to get tickets now. I don't know the hours anymore, but go to their website, find out, and support these buildings. A lot of the times the volunteers will tell you, well, used to tell you some ghost stories when they were bored. I don't know who volunteers here anymore. Probably some of the same folks. But if you don't see a ghost, which obviously I can't guarantee, your money will go to help a struggling nonprofit. You know, Goatman is a local urban legend / cryptid in the area, not specific to West Bend, but various locations outside of West Bend where a lot of West Bend people go to try to experience it. It's known as a legend trip, if you will, when you go to a place where they say they saw Bigfoot in 1942, or where the mothership landed and abducted the person up into the sky. People go to these places late at night when they're bored and have nothing to do, and perhaps had a couple of drinks, to see if they can experience it themselves. And Goatman is such a thing. There's 2 locations that Goatman is said to frequent in Washington County. One is Hogsback Road out near Holy Hill Basilica, which is out in the whole, what's the Irish town? Erin. Out in the Erin area. And then there is Goatman Road in Kewaskum, which is actually South Mill Road, which takes you into the Milwaukee, try to get this right, the Milwaukee River State Forest floodplain something or the other. I failed. But basically it's the woods. It takes you out into the woods. It drops you off in a swampy area where people can go hunting and things of that nature. Both of these locations are also makeout spots. In fact, Goatman is known as a Lover's Lane monster, according to folklorists. He's usually spotted around places where you take your date when you live with your parents, basically. I first found out about Goatman at the Historical Society down the way where we started the tour. They told the story about it on one Halloween program, and I wanted to know as much about it as I could, and that sort of was the catalyst for me writing Washington County Paranormal. Started really getting into the local stuff when I moved up here in 2011. Then I talked to someone while writing that book who said they actually saw this creature. He was back there hunting. He said that he was up there in a tree stand. It was I believe it was bow and arrow season. So he was there in early fall, probably September, just before sunup, as early as you can legally start hunting. And he heard something crashing through the woods. It sounded like a huge deer. He knocked his arrow and pulled back. He was ready to fire as soon as he got a good look at it and could verify it was a deer. And he said what instead came out into the clearing from the brush was a man-like creature that was human upper half with a long beard, small horns, lower half backwards bending legs like a goat or a deer, covered in grayish brown fur. He said that he could actually hear this thing talking in English, saying very, very bad things that I can't repeat in front of mixed company. It was swearing, saying some very foul things, and complaining about trespassers. I don't know what trespassers it saw, because it wasn't aware of him apparently, because it never looked up, it never stopped, it just shambled through the clearing, off into the brush, and after he became sure that it wasn't in the area anymore, as sure as it could be, he climbed down out of the tree, ran out of those woods, got in his truck, and at the time I'd talked to him, which was probably 10 years ago, last time I was able to find him. A lot of people, when they tell you these stories, they get fame that they weren't looking for, and they kind of drop off the radar. So basically, at that time, he said he hadn't went back into those woods anymore, and he doesn't plan to. And so I haven't touched base with him in about 12 years, so I do not know if he has went back in there. Basically, they were driving this thing. It was very near the entrance of Holy Hill, like just a mile away from Holy Hill probably, and very near to their home. They lived right near the basilica. This thing ran out in the road in front of them. Mom, her name is Mindy. Mindy had to slam on the brakes as hard as she could to avoid hitting this thing, which she described as being human-shaped in form, but with backwards bending legs, like a goat or a deer might have. She did not notice any fur, but had saggy, wrinkled, grayish-brown skin. It was running on two legs, and when she slammed on the brakes, she got so close to it that she could not see if it had feet, hooves, wheels, or what at the end of its legs. And she couldn't get a good look at its face, because the moment the headlights hit it, it froze like an animal might, and threw its arms or upper appendages in front of its face. It had an oval-shaped type of head, no type of horns or anything like that were seen, I should say. But as soon as she slammed on the brakes and the thing realized it hadn't been hit, and it was no longer dazzled by the light, it ran off into the woods and disappeared. Her and her daughter were terrified. Mindy went home and drew a sketch of it. But things like that have been seen before and since in that area, and it was the subject of the In Search of Monsters episode that I appeared on ever so briefly. It was the Wendigo episode. It is up on multiple streaming sites, so if you search for the Wendigo episode of In Search of Monsters, you can hear Wendy's account firsthand and find out some more about it. The Wendigo is a Native American and Native Canadian entity, which is said to come about in winter during times of famine and possess people, and it can cause you to even commit cannibalism, kill your family, eat them, all that sort of thing. It appears as a very gaunt, deer-like humanoid with flesh hanging off it, ribs showing, basically a walking dead creature. Do not know if the Wendigo is real. I'd have to see it to believe it, but supposedly if you see it, you become cursed and become a Wendigo, so don't go looking for one. We have no idea what kind of entity this is, but that whole area has a history of strange sightings. There's been people who have told me they have had scratches appear on the sides of the car in that area when they park. People who have said they've seen the Goatman run out in front of them. People who have said they've seen ghostly white dressed women walking around in the fields or near St. Augustine Road in Holy Hill. There's been people who have told me they've seen UFOs and strange lights. The whole area has a reputation for very strange things happening. If you do tend to go out there, I believe the road sign for Hogs Back Road has been removed. It's not out there, but it's out there near St. Augustine Road. So if you roam that area when you're bored, you might have some encounters. And if you do, email me, because I always need more stuff for the tour. But the West Bend Theater is their next stop on the tour. And basically, this whole haunting revolves around a man named Roland Raleigh Mead. Raleigh was a longtime manager here, and in the 1990s, he was walking up the steps to the second floor theater when he had a massive heart attack. Someone eventually found him. They called the paramedics, and unfortunately they were not able to revive Raleigh. He supposedly He definitely did die. He was a real live person, but allegedly he died in the theater. He was pronounced dead in the lobby. Some versions of the story say he died on the way to the hospital, but most versions say he died in the building. We do know Raleigh was a real person who worked here, and this is not a part of folklore. Not long after Raleigh died, people started saying that maybe he didn't really leave the theater when he died. They said they would hear him walking. When he walked, he made a jingling noise because he wore like a big set of jailer's keys on his hip, basically. And they would hear this unique sound of him walking, and of course, he wouldn't be there. A lot of the times on the second floor theater, they would have problems with the films catching on fire. Now, at one point in history, you know, in the black and white era, the silent era of film was made out of silver nitrate. It was very volatile, and if you didn't store it right, it would catch on fire. But this was in the 1990s and the 2000s when these films were catching on fire. One person I talked to was here watching Casper the Friendly Ghost, that CGI 90s movie, and it caught on fire, and they had to have their money refunded because they didn't have another print of the movie. So those are the kind of things they would experience, and then sometimes the operator would be in there dealing with technical issues, and he would hear a clicking sound that was made by a little metal piece directly outside of the theater. I've never worked in theaters. I'm not a theater historian, but it had something to do with those eras of that era of silver nitrate when the film would catch on fire. If you stepped on that part of the stairs, it made a very unique noise. These operators would hear the sound of Raleigh's keys. They'd hear footsteps. They'd hear that click. He couldn't be there. They'd open the door anyway to look for him, and obviously nothing was there. But there's been other sightings of Raleigh. I talked to one guy who was he was a tour patron actually, and he was here on one of the tours. He used to be a manager there. I think it was the 2000s. Because this building was empty for about a decade before it got renovated and reopened. And he would be in there late at night closing, and he would see like a person's shape or a white mist or something float by the security cameras. And it started unnerving him so bad because it happened with such frequency that he would have his friends wait in the lobby while he was closing up the theater. He didn't want to stay here late at night anymore by himself. He also I also had a story from a gentleman who knew a lot of policemen in the community. He's since passed away, but the story he told me was really interesting. He said that
confrontation.
The cops got called down here because somebody saw in this building when it was vacant, they saw a man in sort of a flannel shirt walking around in there in the lobby when nothing had been happening in that building for 5-6 years at this point. So the cops came out, they shined the light in, they saw the person in there, they contacted the key holders, which at the time were the people that owned the Paradise Theater on the other side of town here, and they let them in, or they let themselves in. I think they have a key to get in there, but they went in there and they couldn't find this guy that they saw, and so they called the owners. And they asked them, did you have anybody here working tonight? Does anybody have another key? And they're, no, we have the only key. No one's there. And then they asked them, they asked the policeman to describe the person. The policeman described him, yay big, so many pounds, what he was wearing. They're like, well, that sounds like Raleigh, but he's been dead for about 15 years. So I think that's an intriguing story. We also had a lady on these tours who her mother used to rent an upstairs apartment to Raleigh. I don't know what building. It was a building here in downtown somewhere, because Raleigh didn't drive. He walked everywhere. So he would walk from his apartment, which was a few blocks away from here in some direction, to the theater every day. And after Raleigh died, she said her and her mother, I believe it was, would hear Raleigh walking around upstairs in his now empty apartment, making the jingling sound with his keys and all that very unique sound that Raleigh made when he walked. So you have the same phenomenon going on, attributed to the same spirit of the same person in two different locations that was very personal to him in real life, which I think is really interesting. So who knows, maybe Raleigh still walks to work every night. So if you're down here late at night walking around, listen for Raleigh's keys to you. 2011, because the very first tour I tried to have, I scheduled it a little too early in the year. I was new to Wisconsin. I didn't realize how different Aprils can be from year to year. It was really cold and rainy and awful, and I had 4 people show up.
Me and Scott.
Well, him and Scott, who were here to support me morally. Scott was one of our investigators. They came on the tour, and then there was 3 people from Milwaukee who came up, and
we actually were investigating her mom's house.
Yeah,
or had recently investigated her mom's house.
Yeah, that's right. And then there was one of the oldest men that ever lived, who just walked.
He's
up.
still alive, by the way.
Is he still
No,
alive?
I don't know.
Man? I don't know. I thought maybe you knew who he was. He was dressed in a little checkered suit, and he had on his best fedora.
Was he a ghost?
He showed.
He was the most pissed off ghost I've ever seen.
Well, I think he had bipolar. He was really nice and friendly. He was telling me this story about how he remembered traveling this road in a horse and buggy when he was a kid. And when he worked, he told me his whole damn life story. And but basically we started the tour, and got 2 stories in. It was raining and awful. We got almost to the library there when two of the people from Milwaukee got very belligerent, because apparently their friend told them this was a ghost hunt, and then they demanded their money back. I gave them their money back, and then their other friend, the person whose house I never was involved in this case. I was busy at the time, Mike.
Oh, you weren't there?
No,
I thought you. Oh, okay. I thought you were there.
Mike and the rest of the people were investigating the house. I didn't know her, so she stayed on the tour. We walked about 5 extra feet when the old man, who had been nice the whole time, said, "How much farther do we have to go?" I gave him an estimate on blocks, and he said, "This is the worst damn effing tour I've ever been on. I'm leaving." Had shown no displeasure at all up until that point. He stormed off to find his horse and buggy.
So we're down to what? 3 people now?
Me, Mike,
Scott, and liquored up.
the lady.
Yeah.
She had a water bottle with her. And it turned out to not be water. And we found out along the rest of the tour. I'm now basically giving the tour to one person, because Mike and Scott had already came on it before when I was training myself for it. And she is talking about how she had taken some pills before she got here. So she was on pills and she was drinking. And the whole way down, I'm trying to go through it as quick as I can to get her back to her car, because her friends who demanded their money back.
She's rapidly deteriorating by this
She was
point.
deteriorating rapidly. So I'm like, come on. She's having trouble standing. She's going between all 3 of us, asking us, "Are you married? Is Scott married? Is Mike married?" I'm like, "Yes, we're all married." And then she would repeat the cycle over and over. We got to downtown. We're talking about the Washington House, which is sometimes on the tour. It's a bit of a walk compared to the rest of the places, so I don't have it on the tour very often. And she saw it and she wanted to go in and get some beers. I'm like, "I don't think you need any beers. I think we should get you back to your car." And she wanted to go in there, and so she started up the steps. And I'm like, "Well, you can go in there, but we're going to finish the tour." And we were all going to basically just leave her at the bar, because she's not our problem. She got her tour. You know,
Her friends ditched her.
Her friends will come find her. I was going to come up here and say we left her at the Washington. So she turns to see that we're walking away, and I told her we're not going to go into the Washington House. We don't drink on the tour. She goes to walk towards us, completely not acknowledging that there's steps. Oh, no. Lands face first on the concrete. She doesn't, I don't believe she bled, but boy,
I thought she did, no?
Did she? It was a terrible splash.
Scott and I, by this time, we're laughing our asses off.
I was near tears crying because I'd nearly been mugged. I had an old man tell me I was awful, and this lady nearly killed herself. This was the first tour. First tour.
Very first tour.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
So we help her up and we power walk her to the car. We give her to her friends and be like, "Goodbye." We get in our cars. We go to the Mexican restaurant down the street, and I do everything but cry like a child.
No, we went to Idle Hour. Idle Hour.
Oh, it was the Idle Hour.
Was the Idle Hour,
I
yep.
don't know if that's still down there.
No, it's
There's a
closed.
sandwich shop.
Are they still open?
limited.
Okay. But we went there, and I basically was like, I'm not doing this. I'm canceling the whole thing. I'm never going to do this again. But through Mike's encouragement and Scott's encouragement, I did the next tour 2 weeks later when I had some reservations. It went fine. And now we're like 11 or 12 years into this, and they've ran most years. So Mike is one of these things still exists, so give him a hand.
Why are my license for me?
Well, I would have never done them again if you hadn't encouraged me. I was done.
You went on the TV and everything else, man. You left us behind.
I've been on TV twice in 5 minutes combined. I'm not famous.
I told you you got it all out of the way, so you won't have anything.
Yeah, and your wife was supportive too.
Other than one case of public urination from someone, we haven't had any other problems. So he whizzed all over the lawn at the library. So that's when we stopped doing late night tours. We used to do 9 o'clock tours. Now we just do 7. So I want to thank you guys for coming out. Like I said, I do have.